What's going on, everybody? No, it's been a while, but I've got a really cool tutorial that I've kind of had on the back burner for a while. I've wanted to do this for quite some time. This is all dealing with the original Xbox, and even though I'm kind of calling this the ultimate cooling upgrades for your original Xbox, some of you, especially some of the more advanced people that have dealt with the original Xbox, will note that there are some other things you can do with the console to upgrade your cooling even further. However, I wanted to keep this video and this tutorial kind of on a level where anybody's going to be able to do this. So even if you don't have much experience working with your hands, even if modding and repairing is not really your thing, this is absolutely something that everybody can do. Opening the original Xbox is one of the easiest consoles to open. Obviously, as you can see, I have the motherboard right here. So I'm not going to show you how to open it. There's too many other tutorials, and it's actually a really easy console to open. So I'm not going to cover that here. And you will want to get it to this point. You will want to remove the motherboard completely. There is some stuff we're going to be doing underneath. And we're going to be dealing with the heat sinks and stuff too. Now, let's talk about the materials. All these materials, just like in any of my videos, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need. However, this is essentially going to be in kit form. So everything we use here and everything you see in this tutorial is all going to be a kit that you can get. If you look in the description of this video, there's going to be a link to go directly to my website, the Tinker Mods website, and you can see the kit. This is really not that expensive. It depends on how you look at it, because there's not a lot of materials needed here, but it's not that expensive as far as the kit. Again, I will still go through and tell you everything you need individually, so you don't have to buy this kit. You can absolutely get the stuff yourself. However, there are going to be some things I'll go over with each step. There's going to be some benefits to getting this kit because some of these you can only buy in large quantities, and there's a lot of other things. But we'll talk about each one of those things as we go through each step. So essentially, I guess you could say there's three steps to this. Okay, first step is we're going to be dealing with the main chips under the heat sinks. This is probably the one everybody's heard before. Replacing the thermal compound, stuff like that. Obviously, that is something you definitely should do. You got to remember that, at this time, these are 20 or more years old. And so even if the console's running good, even if it's, maintaining good temperatures right now, it's still something you want to do just to prolong the life because as you'll probably see as we take this one off, because I've never removed these before on this console, like sometimes it can actually be the old thermal compound can be burned on, and that's definitely a problem. So that's going to be the first part of the upgrade. The next part of the upgrades, we've actually got two miniature heat sinks here, and these are actually going to be going on the video chip and your MCPX chip right here. There actually is an error code that you can get that's dedicated to this chip overheating, this MCPX. In addition, of course, you can have a lot of video issues. You can lose video signal and stuff like that. Sometimes that can absolutely just be because of heat over time. So we're going to actually be adding two miniature heat sinks to both of these chips. And we're going to go even a little bit step further with step 3, in which we have these RAM pads. Well, they're not really RAM pads, but they are cooling pads. It's probably hard to see in the video, I'm not sure, but these are actually 16 pads you can have right here, and we're actually going to be putting these on each of the RAM chips. That's also why you need to pull the motherboard out, because obviously you have two RAM chips underneath. And again, it doesn't add much, but when you're talking about possibly 5 to 10 degrees cooler, I mean that's actually a really big difference, especially as these get older. And so that's going to definitely help you keep the thing cooler, stuff like that. So the first things first, we're going to start with the hardest part. And the only reason why this is hard is because getting these heat sinks off, especially if it's your first time, is going to be kind of a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of our extra materials, kind of put them over the side so that we have something to work with. All right, now that we've taken some of those extra parts and we've moved them out of our way, for this step, we're going to be dealing just with the heat sinks, of course. And we've got these 3 parts. Now, if you bought the kit, these are the 3 parts you're going to need. If not, we'll go through what you need as we go. But we'll talk about that in just a second. We're going to set this stuff aside. First things first, though, we need to focus on getting these heat sinks off. Now, I'm not going to lie. Now, don't mind this one, you know, is a little bit beat up. This is a messed up motherboard. This is actually something that's going to have to be repaired in other ways, so it's a perfect tester or a example for this video, I should say. These are a total pain to get off. I've taken off hundreds, if not thousands at this point, and it doesn't really get much easier. The other main thing you need to understand is you have to be careful. You can break the clips that hold these on because you are trying to get leverage to push these down and out. So you've just got to be real careful while still putting enough pressure on it. So keep that in mind. Sometimes I use a little tool like this, but most of the time just a flathead screwdriver is going to help you. And so we're going to get started with these. So on this first, on the CPU heatsink, one of the things I will mention is that if you have a 1.0 version console, this GPU heatsink is going to look a little different. It's going to have a smaller heatsink with a fan attached and a plug right about over here. You'll want to unplug that, of course, after you take this off. Good news is if you have a 1.0, it is much easier to remove that heatsink off because the metal clamp is just way simpler and easier to get leverage on. So first things first, this CPU and the black part right here is actually a lever. You move that up just like that. What you're going to do is you've got 2 sides to work with. Let me move this a little bit. You got 2 sides to work with here. A lot of people, including myself, now you see it is a little loose now, but it's not going to be that easy, trust me. A lot of people like to use this side that's right here because you do have this little tab to push, but sometimes you just got to try both of them until you can get it off. So essentially what you're doing here is you're having to force these to go down and then out a little bit. And it's just kind of a, for lack of a better way to put it, it's just, you know, it's just, you got to get it just right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start like this. We're just, oh, and that one actually popped out already. Well, that was way easier than I made it sound just a minute ago, isn't it? So that one's out. And now we've got that heatsink off. And as you can see, this one I've never even removed it before. This is the original heatsink compound. You can see what I mean by this is just all dried out here. And while luckily this one isn't really burnt, it doesn't mean that this one isn't. That's usually the one it is. It's still, you can tell that it's dried out. It's been there for a long time. And the stock stuff they use in the factory just wasn't very good in the first place. So, yeah. Next, let's move on to this one. Usually this one's a little bit easier on the GPU, but we'll see. So this one, of course, doesn't have that black clip like the other one did, so we don't have anything to flip up here. That also is going to make it a little bit trickier to get just the right force. Oh, and look, of course, that one popped right off too, making it look way easier. Trust me, it's not going to be that easy. Now, all right, guys, so we got that off, but just as I was worried about, this thing is on there tight, and that is a good indicator that some of that heatsink compound has actually started to burn. I mean, look, I can pick the whole thing up just with this. So we're going to have to carefully pry this up, and you're going to want to just kind of go around and around. It's not too hard, but you just don't want to be too rough with it. Ah, there we go. Actually, that's not quite as burned as bad as I thought it was, but this you can see here is way different than this. I mean, this is so crusty. I mean, they're like, you know, whoever was using this console before I got it is lucky that that wasn't already overheating. Luckily, the original Xbox doesn't run as hot, in some more modern consoles, but nonetheless, that's just bad. Okay, so now we've got those pried up. We're going to bring our materials in that I had out before. Okay, now, this is where a little bit of explaining needs to come into place. Okay, if you bought the kit, this is what you're going to get, though, you know, it depends. It might be a different heatsink compound than what you see right here. There's a few different brands out there. I can already see people in the comments, so let me address some issues. This is, of course, a little bit more generic heatsink compound. The reason why this is included is because the soft packs like this can only come with generic stuff. You can't get, or at least not anymore, you can't get Arctic Silver or any of the really good heatsink compound in individual serving size, I guess you could call it, that I could use for these kits. So that's why you're getting these. Second of all, and again, this is going to be up for dispute, debate, whatever you want to say. The original Xbox doesn't run all that hot. And there's no real need to go that far to buy Arctic Silver. You don't need something that high end in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong. If you work on a lot of different things and you want to do this, then going ahead and splurging and getting the Arctic Silver is definitely an upgrade to what you will get in the kit. But you have to keep this in mind. You can only get Arctic Silver in larger, usually the smallest you can get are those needles. And, you know, that's about 20 or 30 of these packs in one. And so that also means it's going to be way more expensive. And if you don't plan on, you know, if you don't have 20 consoles to work on, if you're just doing this for your console, that's going to be a huge waste of your time and money as well. Because, you know, just depending on what's out there, I mean, you could be looking at $10, $15 for one of those needles, and depending on what sizes, you know, you get. That right there is about half the price of this entire kit for everything in it. So you can see why you're going to end up spending a lot more money if you go that route. But again, I just don't think Arctic Silver or some of the higher end stuff is necessary for the original Xbox. It doesn't get, now if you're working with a 360 or an Xbox One or a PS4 or whatever, definitely get Arctic Silver because the temperatures on those run way higher than the original Xbox. Your main goal here is you're just trying to get the old stuff off and put some new stuff on. And believe it or not, even though this is generic in nature, this is still a much better heatsink compound than what was in the factory. I mean, they put the bare minimum on the factory to save money. Now, as you notice, I've got something else. This is called Arctic. This is by Arctic, the same people I was just talking about. This is actually a cleaner, and this helps tons and tons and tons, breaking up some of the drier stuff and help getting it out. You really don't necessarily even need this. You could use rubbing alcohol and stuff like that, but this just works way better. And it's safe. It's not going to accidentally create any static electricity, which, you know, of course, you can see I'm wearing gloves to try to prevent that as well. But I just am a huge fan of these Arctic wipes that help clean thermal compound. And again, this is included in the kit. This is another issue if you want to go out and buy these yourself. It's really rare you can just go buy one or two of these. And even if you do, you're going to spend $6, $7, $8, $9 just to get one or two of these. And so, yeah, you see the price, the price tag on you buying the stuff yourself is going to get up pretty high pretty quick compared to just getting this kit. Other thing, too, typically I actually use razor blades, but I understand that that's not actually ideal for most people. In fact, excuse me, I've made some other videos where I've removed the compound before, and people had an issue with me using razor blades. Well, that is true, but it works fine. So I actually found something cooler and different, but on the same concept. And this is actually a plastic razor blade. As you can see, it looks just like a razor blade, except it's plastic. And you can see it's got the beveled edges on each side there. And what that's going to help us do is it's going to help us both remove the old and spread the new. Because with this bigger chip right here, we will absolutely need to spread that thermal compound around a little bit. So first things first, we're going to open our Arctic cleaner here. Pull out the little wipe. And be prepared, they are a little stinky. Kind of hit you in the face. And you're just going to start wiping it. And see, just like that, that wiped that chip perfectly. I'm not even going to have to scrape that chip, which is awesome. And then we've got this one. I bet you I'm still going to have to scrape this one a little bit, but it is getting a whole lot of that thermal compound off all by itself. That is exactly why I love these. I remember back in the old days having to just pry everything off. Okay, so there's still a little bit on here that's just not wanting to come off. That's where this plastic razor blade is going to come in handy. Because it's not a regular razor blade, you're not going to have to worry about, if you're inexperienced, causing any damage. You're just going to be taking it, well, if I can hang on to it, you're just going to scrape it across. And I'm just getting those little extra bits off. And it wasn't much, because luckily that wipe really does do most of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and do it on this one too, even though this one cleaned up really well. Okay. Now as you can see, that got the last little remainder that the wipe wasn't able to get. That's that stuff that's really burned on there. So the wipe is great to get most of it, but not all the way. So now we're going to give it one more quick wipe down. Now, this is up to you. If you're real particular about things, you could also get yourself some sort of Q-tip, and get the little stuff that's over here on the edges. I'm not quite that anal about things. You just want to make sure it's not over the top of the chip die here. And it really usually won't be by default anyways. So I'm just giving it a little more scrub down. Like I said, if you want to remove that stuff on the outside, that's up to you. I'll show you. Let me grab a Q-tip. I can show you real quick how that's done. Just kind of use it's just a normal Q-tip. And you just kind of scrape it around the outside. And wow, that stuff does not want to come off at all on the edge. Let's see if I can use a little more of this. Because essentially what that Arctic wipe does is it kind of breaks down the material. Okay. So I've got some more of it off, not all of it, but if you really want to get that way about it, want to get every little microscopic piece off, you can do that. There's not going to be any Q-tips or anything included in the kit because that's not really necessary. Now I'm going to wipe this one more time. Now, the one thing you want to be careful about is let this stuff dry. Don't put the heatsink compound on while it's still wet. You can, in fact, I'm stuffing that in there to throw it away. Oh, another thing too about those wipes, if you have really sensitive skin, that's another reason why I wore the gloves. I have really sensitive skin, and they can cause you to break out if you have things like eczema and stuff like that. So, yeah, if you have really sensitive skin, handle that wipe with a glove. I almost forgot to mention that. Okay, now as you notice with this razor blade, I only use the one edge of it to clean the old stuff while leaving the other edge clean. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us another side where we can smear on and smooth out our thermal paste. So what we're going to do is, since I'm right in the middle of a video, I'm not going to wait for it all to dry. I'm taking a dry paper towel and just kind of lightly dabbing, getting the rest of that cleaner off. I wouldn't not use any other chemicals to clean or dry that off. It just either needs to hand dry, or you can just do like I do with a paper towel. Now, we got our soft pack here. We're going to tear it open. You'll see that there's one end that it kind of comes out, kind of like that. That's actually like where you open it. So you're going to rip that off. Now this one doesn't need much. You're just going to do a little dab here. In fact, this one's small enough where I would say you don't even really need to spread it. We are anyways, but I mean, that should spread on its own. Now this one, because it's so much bigger, I want to put about 6 dots, just one in each corner, one kind of out on the edge. And actually, I'm going to put a little bit more in the middle too. Okay, now with the other side that we have not used yet of the razor blade, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just start smearing it out and spreading it out. When you put the heat sink on, it will spread this out a good amount for you, but because of how large the surface area is of this chip, I've always had to go back and spread it. So this does not have to be perfect. You're just wanting to make sure that you're getting it around. Now, I think I need to put just a tiny bit more. And don't be worried about putting too much of this, because if you do put too much, just like we were, you know, wiping off a little bit earlier, it'll squirt out the edges. So too much isn't necessarily an issue. Um, I mean, you technically could put too much if you put ungodly amounts. Like if you did go buy an actual full needle and you put the whole needle on it, yeah, that is insanely excessive and would be far too much. Okay, so as you can see, it's not perfect, but I've got it kind of a good coating going across, and I've done messed it up now. Let me accidentally spread it a little bit too thin. Like I said, you just want to get it like even, because once you put that heat sink back on, it's going to flatten and smooth everything else back out. And so, yeah. Now, obviously, the next part is the heatsink itself. We can't leave that stuff on there. I have seen people leave that stuff on there, but I think that's stupid. What we're going to do is we're just going to use this, the other side, once again. We're going to scrape it off. Let me get all that's a lot. Let me get all that off of there. You just want to scrape off as much as you can, because of course we've got those wipes. So we're going to pull that back out of the bag and do like the final touch clean. You see that's still got some on there, but I've got all the big chunky gunk off of it, and that's the main part. It can't dissolve all that. It's meant to just dissolve thin layers, those wipes. So we're just going to kind of scrape over it a couple more times, just get as much of that off as we can by hand. And that's the beauty of these, that because they're plastic, they're not going to damage. If you don't have much experience, you're not going to have to worry about damaging any of that stuff. So obviously that's a big bonus on that. All right. So we're going to take our white back out. Sorry, I lost my white for a second. Now we're just going to do the same thing like we did to those chips here. And now you can see, now that is perfectly clean now. Oh man, I love these wipes. Remember what it looked like just a second ago? Now it is totally clean and ready to go. That's why these wipes are brilliant. If you don't buy the kit, that's fine, but don't skip on these. Like I say, the only problem is a lot of times you have to buy them in at least boxes of 5, I think might be the smallest, or 10 might be the smallest. But you see, I can get these direct from the manufacturer. I have a commercial account with them, and I can get them in bulk. So I can just pass that saving right on to you, so you're not having to buy more than you actually need. That's one of those benefits I was talking about earlier, getting this kit. Because I think the cheapest I've ever seen, I think it's a 5-pack, but the cheapest I remember seeing a 5-pack is still around $8 or $9. So if you figure, this kit is around $25, that's already almost half of the whole kit just for the one piece of it. So I'm gonna go ahead real quick and spread this stuff out just to be safe. Like I said, I don't think you really have to spread this one because it's such a small die on it. But I will just because. All right, let me get this wipe thrown away. I'm not needed anymore. Let me get another paper towel. I said I'm not going to wait for it to air dry, so I'm going to go ahead and just dab this off with a paper towel to get it dry. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put these back on. I'm not going to really go through the ins and outs. You saw how we just took everything off. It's the same exact process for putting things back on, except I promise you a million times easier. All you're doing is getting that put in. Once you got put in on one side, you push down on the clip side, and you're done. And you can see it's attached now. Now, don't worry, it is going to be just a tiny bit loose because it's not burnt closed on there anymore. So if you see that this is just a tiny bit able to move, that's okay. It's just able to now. Now, I'm not even going to worry about attaching this one yet. I'm going to kind of keep it out of our way a little bit because we're going to move on to step 2. So, now that we've got the heatsink compound replaced, which is, obviously one of the biggest things. Now we're going to move on to the little bit funner part, honestly easier part. We're going to move on to the heat sinks. Now, a few little notes about these heat sinks. If you do not buy the kit, there are a lot of these out there on the market, and I mean a lot. You'll find silver ones, black ones. I've found some that were possibly copper, but maybe they were just brass. I'm not sure. But the biggest thing is the size, okay? If you have a Phillips disk drive, especially, the size of these heat sinks is insanely important because let me see if I have a Phillips drive actually so you guys can know what I'm talking about. Hold on. Well, I was hoping I had one laying around. Well, I'll tell you what, I got one right over here. Hold on. All right, so the Phillips disk drive, which is one of the more popular disk drives. So even if you don't have one, remember that you may one day want to upgrade to the Phillips because it is one of the ones people want the most. It is one of the higher quality ones, though I like the Hitachi better. But that's another story. They have this on the bottom. As you can see, that hump sticks out at least an inch, maybe like an inch and a quarter. And it does go directly on top of this MCPX chip, which is one of the ones we're going to put the heat sinks on. So, if you have a Phillips drive, or if you just want to, plan for the future, be like, well, maybe one day I want to get the Phillips drive, but I'm waiting for my old drive to die out first. You've got to be really careful about these heat sinks, because if you get them too big, they won't fit. In fact, the first set of these I got when I was first getting these kits ready and I was kind of designing them, I got ones that would fit, but I didn't like how close they got. And I believe those were, what were those? Those were 15 millimeters high. And while they did fit, they were basically touching that hump. And I didn't like that because the laser assembly for the disk drive is right there in that little hump part of the Phillips disk drive. And so essentially you'd be transferring some of the heat right to the case of your disk drive. And while it might be okay, I'm not going to take any chances. So I got some that are a little bit smaller. I believe you should be able to find some that are 10 and 12 millimeters tall. And those will do just fine. As far as the size, I think these are 20 by 20 or 25 by 25 millimeters. As far as the width and the length. But yeah, these are going to be real easy to install. As you can see, they put down. Now, the other thing you need to know is some of these don't come with any attachment. Okay, and then you're going to have to get the special type of thermal tape that will also take the heat and transfer it to the heatsink. If you get these ones from the kit, these already have 3M thermal tape on them. So that thermal tape is going to work just like any double-sided tape. We're going to peel the layer off, and then you can just stick it on. and it's thermal tape, so it will transfer the heat from the chip to the heatsink. Okay, so that's the things you need to know about these. The other thing too is it really just depends what's out there. I'm sure sometimes it's different than others, but sometimes you can only get some of these heat sinks in quantities of like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Now, when I was getting everything I needed for this kit, my supplier did offer them in numbers as low as 5. But again, that's something you got to think about because you're only going to need 2. Excuse me. Um, so again, when you get the kit, you're only going to get what you need. That means you're only paying what is actually needed. Um, so if we get the ones in the kit, it's real easy now. I've got gloves on, of course, so this might not be so easy. I might have to take the glove off for this part. Just so I can get that tape peeled off. Yeah, there we go. All right. So see, as you can see, I peeled the little tape off, and you can see the thermal tape exposed. And so the next thing we're going to do, and you do want to be careful about this. Now, this isn't an exact science, so I wouldn't get too concerned about this. But the ridges are in a line there. And so you want the ridges to face front and back, okay? So we're going to stick it on. The reason for that is obviously, here's your AV port right here. Your power supply is over here. This is where your fan is. The fan is pulling air this way. And so if you have these going the wrong way, it won't pull air as efficiently. Again, it would still be fine because even if they went this way, it would still pull air from the side vents here, but it's not going to be quite as efficient. So if you want to, if you're doing all this, you might as well put them on there the right way. Now, for the second one, I'm going to peel the tape off again. Now, this is a 1.4 to 1.5 motherboard, so I've got a Focus video chip right here. If you say have the 1.6, the chip is going to be a little bit bigger. It's going to be honestly a little bit more like the size of the RAM chips right here. If you've got that, all you want to do is you just want to get it centered. Don't put it off to one side or anything. Just get it centered if that's the chip you got. If you've got the Focus or the Connexit, this is actually the perfect size to just fit right on top. And let me flip this so you can get a better view. And again, I've got the ridges going this way again, up and down. And as you can see, now, the thermal tape that I put on these is really good. So you don't need to push these real hard or put much pressure on them. Once you've got them down on there, like they're not, it's not going to come. I mean, you can get them off, but they're not going to come off with very easily. So that's the next part. Now, that's a really important step because there really is an entire error code that can be thrown if this chip right here overheats. And so that is absolutely beneficial to you in the long run. Because, yeah, like down the road, eventually that chip is going to get worn down by the heat over the years. And eventually, you will throw that code. It may take a long time, but when you put something like this on there, it's going to make a huge difference, keeping it cool. Having that extra airflow getting pulled through the heat sink toward the fan is going to do a world of difference for prolonging the life. And of course, that's a huge benefit if you've got a modded console or an expensive console with a lot of mod chips and stuff like that. Otherwise, that's it for step 2. Okay, guys. So now that we've got our heat sinks on, we're going to move on to step 3, which is the heatsink pads, and those are going to be on our RAM chips. Now, these again have the same issue as some of the other ones. You can't buy these in lots of 10 or 20 or whatever. Most time you can only get them at 100. Now, luckily, if you get them directly from China or something, you could get them for just $2 or $3 for 100 of them. So these aren't quite as expensive. But again, getting stuff from China can be really iffy. You can get lost and stuff like that. So, if you get it from the U.S., you're at least looking at $5, $6, $7 for 100 of them. Whereas in this one, Depending on your setup, you're going to need either 8 or 16 of these pads. Now, if you buy the kit, you will get 16. And the reason why you might need 16 is if you have the 128 megabyte RAM upgrade, where of course you put the extra RAM chips, um, that is going to be enough of those pads to put on all of the RAM, even if you've got that upgrade. And even if you don't have that upgrade, you can keep the extras and replace them a year or two down the road just to freshen them up. So either way, um, you're going to be able to make use out of them. So in the kit, you're going to get it something like this, where you've got 16 of them. I said it might be hard to see, but they're kind of small. Now for these, I get 10 by 10 millimeters, specifically because the RAM chip works perfectly for 2 of those put together. Okay, so what you're going to need is some sort of scissors. I'd use something um, on the sharper side. Dole Play School brand is not going to work very well. But what we're going to do is we're just going to cut all these into groups of 2. So there's one. Like I said, it might be hard to see the actual lines, but this is 2. Okay. So now we've got, now obviously we don't have the 128 megabyte upgrade here, so we're just doing these 2 main ones. So after you've got those cut, you can see they've got like a backing. Now again, some of these are different, so wherever you get them from might be a little bit different. But with these, it's got essentially a cover, a thin plastic film on the front and back. So what we got to do is it doesn't matter which side because they're the same either way. We got to get one of the sides off. Oh, and it pulled one pad off. That's all right. Okay, and then we're going to pull this pad off of there. Luckily, these are self-sticking. Now, I know these don't look like much, but the RAM on these don't get that hot in the first place. So we don't need a whole lot to really add a lot of cooling. And that's kind of the good part about them, is that, these only have minimal heat issues. Most of the heat issues you get from these are residual heat, like from the heat sink. So this just adds a little bit of extra cooling power without going overboard. And I think that that's exactly what you need for something like this. Let me see if I can. So one problem about having gloves. Okay. We're going to be doing the same thing now. We're peeling off. Oh, it peeled one apart again. And then we're just going to get that pad off. Stick it on the next one. And they don't have to be perfect. I'm kind of doing this quickly. For me, I do like to get them at least a little bit lined up so they look nice. Because most of the consoles I have are modded and you can see through them, and they don't have a disk drive at all, some of them. So you can see these. So these are moldable a little bit, if that makes sense. So think Play-Doh. They can be slightly molded. So as you can see, you can kind of get them a little bit more lined up and even looking if that's important to you. Otherwise, like I said, it's not, you don't have to do all this. Okay, so there's the first side, but remember, we're going to flip it because we got these 2 as well. And luckily, with the design of the case, we've got just enough room. Now, this is the other reason, too, that I've chosen these particular pads that aren't all that meaty. Because you can get some of these cooling pads that are a lot thicker. The problem is that on this bottom, you really don't have a whole lot of space here. So if you get some of the ones that are like, I think there's some that are 3 and 5 millimeters thick, that's going to be too much. A good way you can, if you don't get the kit, your heat sinks. This is also why I left this heat sink off so I could flip it easier. They have these clips, these black little clips for the, I guess you'd call it a chassis for that black chassis that holds the heat sinks in. Those touch the motherboard case. So you can see my finger's right here next to this one. You can see that's not very thick, this black thing right here. So your chip, your RAM chip already comes a little bit up off the motherboard, and you don't have much leeway. So if you get something that's 10 or 15 or 5 to 8 to 10 millimeters thick, it's probably going to be too thick, and it's going to make the motherboard fit in there weird, and it can create board flex, which is going to create a whole slew of other problems. So don't get anything too thick, or like I said, the stuff that comes in the kit, uh, in the link in the description, that stuff is the perfect size. I've already got it everything measured out and pre-measured out. So as you can see, we've got the ones that are left over, and if you get the kit, you will have some left over. But like I said, that's because if you have the 128 megabyte, you would have 4 more chips to put these on, and that's just to make sure everybody it will work for everybody's setup. Now, the first times I did this, they didn't peel off like that. I wonder why. Maybe I pull them too hard. I guess it don't matter. So we're putting the first one here on our bottom one. Next one. I'm not going to be as anal about lining these up. Oh man, just took the plastic is stuck to my fingers. Like I said, I'm not going to be quite as anal about lining these up. I've already shown you guys how to do that part. Man, this one doesn't want to come off. There we go. Get it on there. There we go. Like I said, I'm not going to be anal about getting those lined up. You get the point. And like I said, the only difference is if you have the 128 megabyte, you'll actually do this twice as much on the 2 right there and the 2 right there from your upgrades. And so that's pretty much it, guys. All in all, I think this is something real cool. Like I said, as you can see, the hardest part is just getting those heat sinks off and doing it carefully. Otherwise, this is all real simple, really accessible for pretty much anybody to do, even if you don't have a whole lot of skill with electronics and stuff like that. So a cool little upgrade to help you extend the life of your console. I did want to add a couple little snippets at the end. Just keep in mind that if you've already got an overheating issue, the heatsink compound might help your issue, but you have to keep in mind that it's totally possible. Wow, that car was loud. You have to keep it in mind that it is totally possible that you've already caused damage to the chips if you've been running it hot, a lot. Um, and so I wouldn't, if you've had a lot of overheating issues already, I would not do this upgrade without possibly considering going ahead and getting a new replacement motherboard, just because you could add all that and then find out that you've already done damage and stuff like that. It can get real tricky if you've already got the issues. Additionally, if you're already throwing the error code for like we talked about, this can throw an error code itself for overheating. If you've already got that problem, it's super unlikely that adding this heatsink or doing any of these upgrades is going to get rid of that code. Once that starts to overheat, it's usually kind of a permanent issue. So this is all preventative stuff so that doesn't happen. So if you've already got that kind of stuff happening, I would look to replace your motherboard first, because you're going to be wasting your time. This isn't a fix. This is just an upgrade. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. And then once again, like I said, check the link in the description. Everything that we just used was in that kit. It's not a really expensive kit, considering that you're prolonging the life of your console and trying to prevent some of these errors and overheating issues from happening down the line. It's actually for the cost of the kit, it's really worth your money there. So definitely look into that. I appreciate you guys checking this video out, and until next time, guys, bye.